Snow fell softly over downtown Boston the night Rose Kingsley's world quietly shifted, though she didn't yet know it. From the 38th floor of Kingsley Tower, the city looked small, manageable, like numbers on a spreadsheet waiting to be rearranged. Rose had built her empire with precision and distance. At 36, she was the youngest billionaire CEO in the state, head of Kingsley Strategic Systems, a data security and infrastructure firm that handled contracts most corporations were never even cleared to see. In boardrooms, she was ice and iron, measured voice, tailored suits, decisions that made grown executives swallow hard. She trusted performance, not promises, credentials, not charm, and certainly not sentiment. Downstairs in the marble lobby, however, stood a man with no visible credentials at all, just a dark overcoat, polished boots, and a nameplate that read Victor Reed. Most people who passed him barely looked up. Some didn't bother to hide their assumptions. A black doorman in a billion-dollar tower was invisible by design. He opened doors, nodded politely, and blended into the background of wealth that wasn't his. Or so everyone believed. The night of the fire changed that illusion. It started as a flicker in the lower data center, an overheating server rack, then a spark, then smoke curling through reinforced vents. Within minutes, alarms screamed through the building. Executives panicked, assistants scrambled, and emergency lights bathed the corridors in a pulsing red glow. Rose stood in her office, receiving updates through a secure line, her mind calculating losses, liabilities, reputational damage. Evacuate the floor. Lock down the mainframe, she ordered, steady as ever. But then a technician's voice cut through. Ma'am, someone's still inside. Before Rose could respond, another update followed. The night guard went in after him. She turned sharply toward the window, heart kicking once, hard. Who? Victor. He didn't wait. 3 floors below. Smoke choked the air as servers popped and glass cracked from heat. Fire crews hadn't arrived yet. And moving through that chaos was the man most people never saw, navigating the corridors with eerie calm, as if he'd memorized them in another life. Rose watched from behind the line of paramedics, something unfamiliar tightening in her chest. It wasn't gratitude. That would come later. It was recognition. The way he scanned the perimeter. The way his eyes tracked exits, blind spots, movements. Not fear. Not adrenaline. Assessment. She had grown up around politicians and power brokers. She knew the difference between panic and training. When the immediate crisis settled and the building was stabilized, she called him to her office. He entered without hesitation, posture straight but not submissive. You disobeyed protocol, she said coolly. The engineer would have died, he replied. No apology, just fact. She studied him carefully. His voice carried no bravado, no attempt to impress. Only certainty. Where did you learn to move like that? She asked. A pause. Security contract work, he answered. It was too vague, too clean. That night, long after the building emptied, Rose accessed internal records. Victor Reed barely existed on paper. Minimal background, generic employment history, references that checked out but revealed nothing. It wasn't incompetence. It felt intentional. As snow continued falling over Boston, she leaned back in her chair, replaying the footage of him disappearing into smoke without hesitation. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the company. Some praised the hero doorman. Others dismissed it as luck. A few board members questioned why a guard had taken independent action at all. Rose remained silent publicly, but privately she watched him more closely. In the lobby, he returned to quiet routine, holding doors, greeting executives by name, reading during slow hours. Yet every movement hinted at restraint, as if strength were something he deliberately concealed. For the first time in years, Rose felt curiosity overriding control. She descended one evening under the pretense of inspection. You always read on shift? She asked. Only when it's quiet, he replied without looking up. The book in his hand was a war memoir. She raised an eyebrow. You like war stories? He met her gaze evenly. I like stories about survival. The answer lingered longer than she expected. In that moment, amid the gleaming marble and filtered wealth of her empire, Rose Kingsley realized something unsettling. The man everyone overlooked might be the only one in the building who truly understood danger. And for reasons she couldn't yet explain, that realization unsettled her more than the fire ever had. The days after the fire should have returned to normal, but normal no longer fit inside Kingsley Tower. Rose found herself watching the lobby cameras more often than quarterly reports. She told herself it was about liability, about ensuring protocols were followed. But the truth pressed heavier than that. Every time Victor Reed stepped into frame, there was something controlled about him, something deliberate in the way he carried silence like armor. Meanwhile, the board had a different focus. During the next executive meeting, CFO Daryl Mendez adjusted his cufflinks and said with thinly veiled irritation, "We can't romanticize recklessness. He's a doorman, not a decision-maker." A few others murmured agreement. One member, older and sharper, added, "Let's not forget optics. We don't elevate night staff into heroes. It blurs lines." Rose's jaw tightened. She didn't defend Victor outright. That would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. But she felt the shift. The same people who praised courage in press releases were quick to reduce it when it wore the wrong uniform or the wrong skin. Outside the boardroom, rumors evolved. Some employees praised Victor openly. Others reduced the story to a lucky coincidence. A visiting consultant joked within earshot, "Guess even the help gets there 15 minutes." The word lingered in the air like smoke that never cleared. Rose noticed the way Victor absorbed it without reaction. No flinch, no glare, just the same quiet nod as he opened the glass doors. But she began to see what she had previously ignored, the subtle assumptions. The way delivery drivers spoke over him. The way junior executives handed him coats without eye contact. The way security updates bypassed him entirely, despite the fact that he had been the one to run into fire when everyone else ran out. Boston society pages soon picked up a softer angle. Mystery guard saves tech empire. Paparazzi occasionally lingered outside the tower, hoping for a photograph. Rose dismissed them publicly. Privately, she descended more often to the lobby under harmless excuses. Late meetings, early departures, forgotten files. Conversations between them lengthened. What began as polite exchanges evolved into something measured and unexpectedly honest. He spoke sparingly about his past, describing contract work and travel overseas, without detail. She spoke of corporate warfare and growing up in political shadow. They never labeled the connection forming between them, but it grew in shared glances and unspoken understanding. It was Rose who crossed the invisible line first. A charity gala loomed, a high-profile event filled with investors, senators, and media. Her date had canceled last minute, citing unforeseen obligations, which she translated as discomfort with recent controversies. On impulse she barely recognized as her own, she approached Victor before the event. "I need an escort tonight," she said calmly. His eyebrow lifted slightly. "Security escort?" A beat passed between them. "A partner," she clarified. Silence stretched, thick and electric. He studied her face, searching for doubt. Finding none, he nodded once. The gala entrance was a blaze of flashing cameras. When Rose stepped out of the car beside a Black Doorman in a tailored suit instead of a tuxedoed financier, the temperature shifted. Whispers sparked instantly. "Is that her guard?" She brought staff. Victor didn't react to the murmurs, but Rose felt each one like a challenge. Inside, introductions faltered. A senator's wife smiled too tightly. "How progressive," she remarked. Rose held her ground. "This is Victor Reed," she said evenly. "He saved one of my engineers from a fire last week." The woman's smile thinned. "How brave." But her eyes said something else entirely. What began as defiance became something deeper in the weeks that followed. Rose found in Victor a steadiness untouched by wealth or gossip. He did not treat her like a trophy or a stepping stone. He challenged her when she deflected vulnerability. He listened without trying to control outcomes. The more the media speculated, the more the board bristled. "You're risking reputation," Mendez warned privately. "Investors are uneasy." Rose's answer was simple. "Then they're invested in the wrong things." The relationship intensified under scrutiny instead of shrinking from it. And when, months later, Rose Kingsley announced in a quiet courthouse ceremony that she had married Victor Reed, Boston's elite reacted exactly as expected. Headlines exploded. Commentators dissected her judgment. Anonymous sources called it reckless, performative, scandalous. The phrase Black Doorman appeared in more articles than husband. But while the world obsessed over status and skin color, none of them knew what Rose had begun to suspect, that the man they dismissed as staff carried secrets far heavier than public opinion. And soon, the truth about Victor Reed's past would make their outrage look painfully small. Marriage did not soften the storm, it intensified it. Within 24 hours of a courthouse announcement, Kingsley Strategic Systems stock dipped 3%. Financial analysts went on morning television panels questioning Rose's judgment. One anchor smirked while saying, "From boardroom to broom closet romance." Social media was harsher. Comment sections filled with coded language that barely concealed what they truly meant. She married beneath her. This is what happens when power gets emotional. And again, the phrase repeated like a weapon. The Black Doorman. Not Victor Reed. Not her husband. A title reduced to stereotype. Rose read every headline without blinking, but late at night, when the penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor grew quiet, she felt the weight of it pressing against her ribs. Victor noticed, of course. He always noticed, but he never told her to fight the noise. He simply remained steady beside her, cooking simple dinners, fixing a loose cabinet hinge without being asked, watching the skyline as if measuring distances no one else could see. The board, however, was not content with headlines. An emergency meeting was called. Rose entered the room in a white suit instead of her usual gray, a deliberate choice. Victor did not attend. He had refused when she asked, saying calmly, "This is your battlefield." Inside, the temperature was colder than usual. CFO Mendez wasted no time. "With respect, Rose, this marriage complicates perception. Investors are nervous. There are background concerns." She folded her hands. "Background concerns." Stephen Parlow cleared his throat. "We've attempted to verify Mr. Reed's prior employment. There are gaps." The word hung heavy. Gaps. As if a missing paper trail implied deficiency. Rose's voice stayed even. "My husband's past is not a line item." Another member leaned forward. "It becomes one when it affects valuation." That was the moment she understood. This wasn't about love or optics. It was about control. They had accepted her as long as she fit their mold. Brilliant, detached, predictable. Marrying a man they had overlooked threatened that structure. "If any of you believe my marriage undermines this company," she said calmly, "you are free to sell your shares." Silence followed, not because they respected her choice, but because they recognized her power. The real shock came 3 nights later. A black SUV idled outside the penthouse building just past midnight. Victor had been unusually quiet that evening, his posture subtly different, alert in a way Rose had only seen once before, the night of the fire. When the doorbell rang, he did not startle. He simply stood and walked toward it with measured steps. Rose followed at a distance. Through the security camera feed, she saw 2 uniformed military officers standing rigidly at attention. Victor opened the door. The taller officer saluted. "Commander Reed," he said firmly, voice echoing in the marble corridor. Rose felt the word like a physical impact. "Commander." The officer continued, "We apologize for the delay in contact. Your status was classified under Directive 7. We've been ordered to formally restore recognition." The second officer held out a sealed case. Victor didn't reach for it immediately. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not active," he replied. "Understood, sir. But the record stands." Rose's pulse thundered in her ears. When Victor finally stepped aside and allowed them in, the case opened to reveal medals. Decorations engraved with citations for classified operations, overseas extractions, and a commendation for valor under direct enemy fire. One citation referenced a covert unit operating under the authority of the United States Naval Special Warfare Command. The words were unmistakable: Elite Special Operations Commander. Rose looked at her husband as if seeing him for the first time and yet recognizing him completely. The calm in crisis. The calculated movement. The instinct that had carried him through smoke without hesitation. It wasn't contract security. It was years of elite training, missions that officially never existed, sacrifices buried beneath national silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered after the officers left. Victor met her gaze steadily. "Because I married you to escape that life, not bring it back." There was no arrogance in his voice, no performance, just truth. The next morning, the revelation did not remain private. Somehow, through channels Victor hadn't anticipated, the information reached the press. By noon, every outlet that had mocked Rose days earlier now ran a different headline. Billionaire CEO's husband revealed as decorated Special Forces commander. The same commentators who had questioned her judgment now praised her discretion. The board members who had implied impropriety sent carefully worded congratulations. But Rose understood something deeper than public reversal. The world had respected Victor only once his title aligned with their definition of power. Before the medals, before the rank, he had been dismissed. And that realization burned hotter than any scandal. Public opinion did not simply shift. It snapped into place like a compass correcting itself. Within days of the revelation, every outlet that had once reduced Victor to the Black Doorman now used a different vocabulary. Decorated, elite, classified hero, commander. The transformation was almost theatrical. News anchors who had smirked days earlier now spoke with reverence. Financial analysts who questioned Rose's stability called her strategically private. Invitations flooded in military galas, leadership forums, closed-door security summits. Kingsley Strategic Systems stock rebounded sharply, climbing higher than before the dip. The board called another emergency meeting, but this time the tone was noticeably different. CFO Mendez cleared his throat and offered a tight smile. "We were unaware of the full scope of Commander Reed's background." Rose didn't miss the emphasis on his title. She folded her hands calmly. "You were aware of his character," she replied. No one responded, because that had never been the issue. Victor, meanwhile, did not change. He still woke before dawn, still moved through rooms with quiet awareness, still preferred black coffee and silence over attention. The medals were secured in a drawer, not displayed. When reporters requested interviews, he declined. "I didn't serve for headlines," he told Rose simply. Yet attention found him anyway. Veterans reached out privately. Families of former unit members sent letters of gratitude. One envelope contained a photograph of a rescued humanitarian convoy overseas, men, women, and children alive because a covert extraction team had refused to leave them behind. Rose read every word. Each story added dimension to the man she had chosen, not because of rank, but because of integrity. And still, beneath the admiration, she noticed something else. The same executives who once avoided eye contact now sought Victor's handshake. The same socialites who whispered at the gala now requested private dinners. Respect, it seemed, had arrived only after validation from a system they trusted. The true reckoning came when Rose addressed her company publicly for the first time since the marriage. Employees gathered in the main atrium of Kingsley Tower, cameras streaming live. Victor stood off to the side, not on stage but visible. Rose approached the podium in a navy suit, her posture steady. "Over the past month," she began, "there has been significant commentary about my personal life." A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the crowd. She didn't smile. Many of those comments were not about business performance. They were about perception, about who was considered worthy. The room quieted. My husband was called just a doorman. He was underestimated, overlooked, reduced. She paused deliberately. Before anyone knew he was a commander, before anyone saw medals, her eyes swept across executives, staff, investors watching remotely. Character does not become valuable when a title is revealed. It is valuable long before. The silence that followed felt heavier than applause. And when applause finally came, it wasn't polite. It was sustained. That night, back in their penthouse overlooking the harbor, the city lights shimmered against dark water. The storm had passed, but its imprint remained. Rose stood beside Victor near the window. "If they'd never found out?" she asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. I'd still be the same man. She turned to him. I know. And that was the truth anchoring everything. She had not married a commander. She had married the man who ran into fire when protocol said wait. The man who endured whispers without bitterness. The man who chose humility over recognition. The world had needed medals to understand his worth. She had only needed the moment he stepped into smoke. Outside, Boston moved forward, busy, loud, quick to judge and quicker to revise. Inside there was calm. Not because headlines changed. Not because the board fell in line. But because beneath wealth, power, race, and rank, something quieter had proven stronger. Dignity that does not depend on permission. And in that stillness, Rose Kingsley knew the greatest truth of all. The real shock was never Victor's past. It was how small the world had been for not seeing him sooner.